intro, no fancy stuff. Just going right for it this week and keeping it brief. Find it suits the PC I am putting together here. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely ended up loving the latest gen PC I built last time on this channel, the 5600X with an RTX 3050, but it did get me wondering, RT features notwithstanding, how much better could I do for similar or better performance? Can I slash 10%, 20%, 30% or even more of the price of the PC and still have the same or better performance? Well, that is what we will find out today. What I will be using is a very unpretentious CIT or chit or whatever they like to call themselves. Normally I don't like them that much, but with a few tweaks this one ended up okay. It's an M80X and I kinda got dragged down this route as I originally wanted to use another nicer case, but I would have had to drop the water cooler going over my set budget. And for me, raw performance comes first. Pretty lights are just nice to have, but even so, have them with shell because I rigged this 12V RGB strip that will be software controlled in addition to what I want to say is the number 7 for whatever reason on the front of the case. Weird choice, but hey, it probably stands for something somewhere in the world. Components I will be using today include the 256 M.2 SSD, a ASUS Prime B450M-A motherboard that I modified with a heatsink so it doesn't boil its VRMs if you want to overclock, 16 gigs of 3200 Mbps RAM, and a very well-rounded Ryzen 3600 processor. This will be cooled by the Corsair H60 water cooler and the graphical side will be taken care of by the GTX 1070 Ti. With a power-hungry GPU like this, I would not opt for a restrictive M80X chassis, but one of the advantages of having a blower card is that it does not expel any hot air inside the chassis, so it does not need acres of space to work effectively. Downside of that is that the blower is quite loud under heavy load. That is not a criticism of this particular card that works 100% as intended, and I've even serviced it with new thermal paste and a good heatsink clean, but to blower designs in general. That's why nowadays most blower cards are custom models that are made by various OEMs specifically for use in their more restrictive cases. So spent about 20 minutes trying to decide how to install this cooler. The footage is sped up about 1000 times or something, but in the end I just put it in an exhaust position with the fan behind the radiator because I just think it looks cooler that way. Yes, please judge me that I put way too much thermal paste. The tube was empty, so whatever was left in there would have gone to waste anyway. See that I felt a tinge of guilt that I even sprayed out a little. Off camera I did a spot of cable management and I also installed a 2TB hard drive. I forgot to mention that the PSU I am using is an AeroCool integrator. It's not my favorite brand, but it's competent and it will do well enough. Sort of swore off AeroCool after trying a brand new Cylon, but this one, well, it's pleasantly inoffensive, as a PSU should be. I know it doesn't quite sound it, but it is in actuality a compliment. Let's have a look at some pictures and I shall see you in the benchmarking section. Remember what I said in the beginning, that I'm trying to build a system that will better the RTX 3050 but do it on a much lower budget? Well, in heaven, which is an older benchmark, it's an absolute bloodbath. 1070 Ti absolutely slays the 3050 without any sort of remorse. Here, the newer Ampere architecture of the 3050 counts for naught because this benchmark only cares about pure raster performance. 1070 Ti actually beats it to the tune of 42 FPS. Ouch, that is 25% extra performance for almost £100 less. Yikes. Comparing here the prices that I paid for these cards, the 3050 at MSRP and the 1070 used. Comparing it with cards from its own generation, it slots in nicely between the 1070 and the 1080, being 30 FPS faster than the former and only 9 FPS slower than the latter, and with the price difference I would say this is a much better value than the GTX 1080. Superposition, which is a much newer benchmark, but based on the same underpinnings of heaven, the 1070 absolutely shines with 76 FPS on average, a game coming well ahead of the 3050's 60 FPS. Rocket League is the first actual game we will be taking a look at today, and I must point out that this is more of a CPU test these days than a GPU test. Also, the result needs to be taken with a good helping of salt because performance tends to vary from one PC and one patch to another. So we are averaging around 300 FPS, which is slower than the 3050 system. Just to bear in mind that one had the advantage of the newer 5600X, while the 1070 Ti is supported by the 3600, and that will go a long way towards explaining the difference. Well, in Fortnite the comparison kinda breaks down between Pascal and Turing and Ampere generations. On one hand, the 1070 Ti is still the more powerful card, on the other the 3050 has DLSS at its disposal. I for one am a very enthusiastic proponent of both DLSS and FSR because of the great effect on the frame rate with minimal impact to visuals. So that with all settings set to epic, this does very well with about 78 FPS on average, so if you are a casual player, that seems like your best bet. For comparison purposes, when DLSS and RT options are off and set to DX11 with epic draw distance and everything else set to medium, the 3050 was on par with the 1070. But it was significantly outpaced by this 1070 Ti. Horizon Zero Dawn, the 1070 Ti does a great job posting 81 FPS on average at favored quality settings, which is still very good for this type of game, shows just how relevant the Pascal cards still are. The fact that FSR is a GPU agnostic technology is a true boon for these pre-Turing cards, and I absolutely love that. Though I would not advise going lower than ultra quality if playing at 1080p because of the render resolution decreases and then you do start to spot artifacts. Do sort of prefer DLSS, but this has the upside that it works on any card. And here we get an extra 9 FPS. And even if today that does not make this game any smoother on a 60Hz monitor, there will come a time and a title where it will make all the difference, I'm sure. The intro motorcycle chase sequence in Days Gone, at very high no less, returns a 74 FPS average, outpacing the 3050 to the tune of 7 FPS. Not massive, but statistically important, as unlike something like Heaven, this is a modern game tuned for newer architectures. So the 1070 Ti powers through with sheer render muscle regardless. Starting to like Far Cry 6 in spite of its glaring word thread that is bound to a single CPU thread. That I don't like, but with every patch the performance gets better and better. Now in a vanilla configuration we are getting 67 FPS on ultra settings. I for one am rather happy with that. But there is the elephant in the room, and I'm not talking about ray tracing because this is the only game I have to check settings to understand if it is on or off. No, just like Days Gone, I am talking about FSR, AMD's GPU agnostic upscaling technology. FSR set to ultra quality because of the 1080p render resolution, the benchmark looks just as good. I can technically spot a bit of shimmering, but only because I am viewing the clip on a 34-inch monitor with its resolution set to 1080p. Playing back the footage on a 1080p 24-inch panel, shimmering is as good as gone, and for that reason I can wholeheartedly endorse turning it on and nabbing an extra 8 FPS for virtually no cost, pushing the average to 75. Now for the big one, Cyberpunk with patch 1.5. Now complete with the benchmark mode that helps comparisons. High, without FSR, this scored a rather impressive 52 FPS, which is perfectly playable. Yes, you lose a bit of eye candy derived from RT, but the game still looks fantastic. More impressive in my opinion is when we turn on FSR and set it to ultra quality, we get a jump to 72 FPS. That is a truly remarkable increase with next to no visual artifacts. Oh, I know I've been raving about DLSS and FSR in every video for a while now, but I am truly excited for the future. Today this PC will be amazing in all available AAA titles, sure, but what about in 2 years time? Heartening to see the impressive FPS increases that this type of upscaling technology can bring to the table if implemented correctly. And FSR doesn't even have an AI algorithm behind it, being more of an incredible smart filter. Really, I can't tell you how excited I am about Intel's announced AI upscaling technology that competes with DLSS and FSR, but does not require any dedicated tensor cores. This run today consists of Forza Horizon 5, and at high settings the 1070 Ti has outspaced the 3050 again by 7 FPS, posting 93 FPS on average. It makes for a fine gaming experience. I confess I genuinely had fun building and testing this PC. I think this really represents better value than the 3050. Sure, the driver support will end a bit earlier, but that is literally years down the line. Apart from DLSS, the 3050 is essentially toothless by comparison, with some reviewers even going as far to suggest that you should only turn ray tracing on where you want to take a screenshot and then resume playing without it. I'm not going to go anywhere near that far because I do think ray tracing is possible on a 3050 because I tested it myself. But that being said, the prudent thing to do is to say that the jury is still out. What I can say for certain is that I managed to build this PC at the cost of roughly 25% less than the 5600X plus the 3050. And with that, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and see you in the next one.